and I wanted to discuss the an example of like how like the Anglo left is a genuinely perfidious and wretched creation, which you would have heard me talk about on numerous occasions before. But given that this is becoming a bigger and bigger problem, it deserves a little bit further explanations. So I'm going to endeavor to do that over the next few nights. Now, I wanted to start by talking about somebody you will have heard me mention before, and that is a certain Mr. Owen Jones. Now, Mr. Owen Jones was born in the same town I was born in, but 2 years later than me, and I've weathered so much better, you know? And the point about mentioning him is I wouldn't bother mentioning this infernal pipsqueak eunuch. But unfortunately, he keeps being put on platforms and he keeps being promoted as a left-wing thought leader or influencer or commentator, whereas in actual fact, the man is an establishment stooge of the worst possible kind. That the kind of stooge which pretends his whole act is that he pretends he's different, that he's oppositional. But in actual fact, what he does is he leads his audience in a merry dance and into following every single bourgeois trend. Now, of course, Owen Jones has got a long history of this. He used to be a Trotskyite. I think he still is. He came out of the international Marxist tendency, which is now rebranded as the Revolutionary Communist Party. I wonder if he still hangs out at the same haunts as his old comrades. But he emerged around about 15 years ago as part of the sort of new generation of left media figures. So it's him, Aaron Bastani, Laurie Penny, if anybody remembers her. I certainly don't, or barely do. Ash Sarkar being another one, various others who were they all were propelled forward at the time of the student occupation movement 14 years ago now. And Jones sort of rode this wave and put himself about at the Guardian as like I'm just a working class bloke, act, pretending to be in opposition to government cutbacks, pretending to be a big time radical, getting stuck on every single platform of a TUC organized event over the course of the 7 or 8 years from 2010 to almost the end of the decade. And he was always put on these platforms, despite the fact that he'd done nothing. He was being brought on there to talk about something or another. At one point, I was in a seminar with him in Manchester where he was going to be talking about housing. And it was clear as soon as he opened his mouth, he had not the slightest idea of the subjects upon which he spoke. So even me back then, because I was still in a Trotskyite party myself, I got up and said, well, there needs to be a mass nationwide program of council house building. And unless we're prepared to do that and burst the house price bubble and accept the consequences then of doing that, then we're going to be fiddling whilst Rome burns, essentially. And Owen looked horrified. Maybe he has some rental properties that he doesn't want to put at risk. But the point is that this moron, this opportunist, this hack, this eunuch is held up as some sort of thought leader, whereas in actual fact he barely has two thoughts to rub together. And my point about him backing up every bourgeois narrative going is that, of course, Jones, being a social democrat, is an anti-communist. He has, of course, repeatedly denounced all of the actually existing socialist countries, including Cuba. He's called for the removal of socialism in Cuba and the ushering in of sort of a Gorbachevite period, which would lead to, of course, the destruction of socialism in Cuba. That's what Jones is ultimately in favor of, though he pretends that he's not. One of the slippery things that he does, which is a trick he learned from the Trotskyites, which is that he will declare that, for instance, with regard to Cuba, the Castro regime must go. But, the Cubans should keep the benefits of it. This is the old line the Trots used to use about the USSR and the people's democracies in Yugoslavia. The regime must go. But, I want to see the nice bits preserved. Again, it's the Trotsky line about the USSR. Whereas in reality, if the Trotsky line did come to fruition, it was put into place by Gorbachev. and look at the results. It's the same slippery game that Owen Jones plays with regard to Syria, where he was screaming for the destruction of the Assad regime for years, and now it's happened, and now roving gangs of counter-revolutionary sectarian murderers executing people by the thousands. Jones says, "Oh my God, I didn't want this." Well, who do you think was leading the Syrian counter-revolution, Owen? Who do you think HTS/Al-Qaeda/ISIS work for? Who did you think was leading that march on Damascus? The answer? Well, it was the servants of British and US imperialism, which of course Owen Jones never wants to talk about. Now, nominally, he's opposed to Israel. He is opposed to the Zionist war on Gaza. But in actual fact, he's been doing the Israeli regime's dirty work in the media for years now, building up the anti-Semitism lies against the supporters of Jeremy Corbyn, declaring that the Labour Party under Corbyn had a huge anti-Semitism problem, whereas in actual fact, most of the charges, it was demonstrated later, were grotesquely overinflated or just straight up manufactured, leading to the expulsion of thousands of people who were Corbyn's own supporters in a project that Jones nominally said he supported. So at each stage, Jones does two things: tacks to the left to try and pretend that he's on the side of the radicals, but in reality makes tap dances to the right to make sure that he's solidly in the same column as ruling class interests, calling for the destruction of the Syrian government led by President Assad. He he screams and shouts about justice for Palestine, but backs up the intelligence operations of the Israeli government and their British allies in suppressing anti-Zionist speech inside the Labour Party and the wider Labour movement. And that added to this, of course, as I said earlier, the man is a rabid anti-communist. Now, further to this, of course, Owen Jones has earned, justifiably so, the ire of other groups, particularly those who have been taking a stand against gender ideology, and see my previous video on this if you haven't done so already. Jones is also an enthusiastic proponent of gender ideology. In fact, that's for him, it's a risk-free thing. It was until recently, because it enabled him to seem oh so radical whilst risking no offense to his ruling class sponsors, of course. And of course, he's got involved in the attempts at online cancellations of various different what are referred to as trans exclusionary radical feminists, or TERFs. He is engaged in spiteful Twitter spats with various different people, declaring that they can't tell him what a woman is, and therefore any man who has a random strange thought in his head can become a woman just by desiring it to be the case. And Jones has been a backer of the most radical ends of the gender ideology movement. Again, a movement that is backed by and funded by the ruling class, including by the likes of Warren Buffett himself, who invested heavily in drugs like puberty blockers. So Jones has been all in on this. He's been all in on summoning up online pile-ons against, mostly women, it must be said. In fact, it seems that Jones has a real problem with women. And that isn't just because Jones himself is a homosexual. It is because there's plenty of gay men out there who don't have problems with women. Jones does, quite clearly, and clearly does not like being contradicted by women. In his defense, he summoned up the great excuse that he can't be a woman hater because his mum says he's not, which is an excuse so lame it would belong on a badly forged schoolboy's note about why his homework had been eaten. I didn't do it. My mum said I didn't, I didn't forget it. My mum says in this note I've got here, teacher, that I'm a very good boy and would never do something like that. It's bizarre. And thankfully now he is finally getting denounced. He's getting denounced by anti-Zionists and anti-imperialists. He's getting denounced by various different feminist groups for his associations with gender ideology. But the foul little noxious git is still popping up everywhere and claiming that he's being persecuted now. Whereas in actual fact, he is a rat, he is a snake, he belongs in the same category as Paul Mason. The job of a Trotskyite, Jones is a Trotskyite, is to tap dance around and to fool enough people that he's some sort of radical, but then lead them back in the direction of supporting the line of the ruling class, be it over Israel, be it over anti-communism, be it that he is rapidly promoting gender ideology. These are all ruling class interests that Jones promotes. And again, his job is to mislead people. This is why he's put on platforms. His job is to sell reactionary bullshit to you, dressed up in radical clothing. That's the job of, in fact, the entire leftist so-called intelligentsia and commentariat, whether it's Jones, Aaron Bastani, Ash Sarkar, etc., right up to the man who's the final boss of all of them, which is Paul Mason himself. These people's jobs are to mislead, misinform, divide, and confuse people. And so when you look at whatever the hell it is that Owen Jones is saying on any particular day, always bear in mind his real bosses lie within the ruling class. No matter how much he screeches and squeaks about how much he's in favor of something progressive, look at who he is: a reactionary, an anti-communist, a man who has been rabidly in favor of regime change in Cuba and Syria and Libya and all manner of other places, a supporter of Zionism, a supporter of the ultra-reactionary anti-woman, anti-children gender ideology, an all-round foul, obnoxious, intellectual eunuch for hire by the ruling class.